Hi there. In this video, I'm going through each of the different base game corporations for Terraforming Mars. I have a couple different lists of categories that I use to kind of rank and give strategies for each of the different corporations and what I feel works best. Again, these are my opinions. If I have something that you feel I got wrong, feel free to leave a comment below and we can have a discussion about it. I put down for each of the different corporations a SWOT chart, and I'll explain what that is in just a second. I go through some different strategies, I go through some different cards, and then at the end I kind of give an overall ranking. Again, this is just for the base game. I would hope to do the other expansion corporations, promo corporations, etc. I have all of the lists all out there and my kind of ideas all about. But if you like this video and you'd like to see more, leave a comment and a like and let me know what you think. This is just a little passion project of mine. Okay, this is called a SWOT chart. So SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. This is how I break down kind of my evaluation of each of the different corporations based on what's helpful internally, helpful externally, and what's harmful internally to the corporation, what's harmful externally to the corporation. So examples of strengths, so helpful internal, would be the corporation's innate abilities that kind of go with that. It's usually more about what the corporation is and what it does. Helpful externally would include cards, the board presence, awards, maybe some milestones, etc., etc. It just depends on a couple different things for that. Again, there's going to be a lot of variation between each of the different corporations. Harmful internal, so weaknesses, could be a lack of strength with the maybe initial startup with the corporation. It could be some innate difficulties with engine building. Again, it can be a variety of different things that's going to affect the corporation in a negative manner. And last but not least, harmful external, so threats would include other players, so events, clogging up the board, hate drafting, those sorts of things. There's lots of different things I think that could fit into that category, and I'll go more in depth with those in each of these base game Terraforming Mars corporations. Okay, so for the second half of my review, I have strategy, fun combos, player count, and overall ranking. So strategy, all I put was what works best, or what I feel works best. What are the cool avenues to victory? How do you think you can ride this corporation and become the most profitable and most dynamic corporation on the surface of Mars as it's terraforming? Fun combos, these aren't necessarily cards that are the best that go with this corporation. I just think that they're cards that are fun to play with. Maybe they provide a different lens or something that's a bit more interesting than necessarily, here's a corporation that wants Jovian tags, let's get all the Jovian point cards, that kind of thing. There's some that are, I think, pretty obvious, but I picked ones that I thought were just fun to go with each of the different corporations, and I go into each of them for each of the different base game corporations. For player count, I usually put what's better. More players, less players, does not matter as much as the kind of neutral. And I explain that for each of the different corporations, how I feel. And then the very last one is my overall ranking. So is it an S tier? Is it A, B, C, D, or F? And I kind of give a rationale based on all of the things I've talked about thus far. All right, so first off, we have Credicor. Credicor starts with 57 ME, and its effect is after you pay for a card or standard project with a basic cost of 20 ME or more, you gain 4 ME. So it's a neat little ability. It's not amazing. It would be better if it was just a straight discount rather than getting it back afterwards, but it's still okay. What's helpful internally for the corporation, it has some good starting money. $57 is a great starting point. Having that discount again is also beneficial. Harmful internal strategies for this are basically that it doesn't really do anything. There's no engine. There's nothing that props this company up other than having that starting money. What's helpful externally is that it's open to many strategies. You can do a whole bunch of different things with this. It doesn't necessarily have to be just whatever it is in your starting hand, whatever it is that you're kind of thinking of going. It can be many different paths and different options that you can choose from. What's also harmful externally is that it's based on drafted cards. So if your cards aren't good, or if you get hate drafted, or there's not a good strategy that's open, this one can dirtle because it doesn't have an engine of its own. The main strategy I find for this corporation is go big or go home. Stick with those 20 plusers, especially if it's right on the dot. Having, again, 20 or 21 or 22 or close to that is the most beneficial for you because you get those $4 back every single time. And that you're very open, so you can go for pretty much whatever strategy you want. What some fun combos are for this one is that, again, it's open. You can go for Jovians, so 20 plus. There's lots of different Jovian cards that are 20 or more. There's also some cool events like Large Convoy here, trying to aim for those 1 victory point per animal type events that are also expensive are also great. Player count, this one's kind of neutral. It doesn't really get affected a whole lot, plus or minus for more or less people in the game. It's overall ranking for myself. All right, next up we have Ecoline. So Ecoline starts with 2 plant production, 3 plants, and 37 ME. So not a lot of money. Its effect is that you may always pay 7 plants instead of 8 to place a greenery. And you also get a greenery tag, a plant tag there. What's helpful internally is that the 7 plants ability is very good. And you can get some good production with this corporation, especially if you're sticking with that plant production. I find that you can have a good kind of internal strategy with this. You're very focused, which can be helpful for you. What's harmful internally is that it can be slow to start. Only getting those 3 plants at the beginning makes it so that getting to that 7 might take a couple generations, which is hard. It's also not innately synergistic, meaning that when you play the forests on the board, you need something to go with those. Obviously, cities are the best thing to do with that. Same thing with playing next to oceans, etc. There's a whole bunch of board strategies that you can use with this one. But if you don't have those to go along with it, you might be in a difficult spot. What's helpful externally is that there's lots of city cards in the deck. You can use a lot of those to maybe make up for your lack of money production to place cities using $25. You can use the steel cards instead. What's also harmful externally is that other cities people might just block you or put cities next to your force because they know that you're going to be putting a lot of force, because that's kind of the best ability of your corporation, obviously. Or people can disrupt your plants, so they can use asteroids, they can use a variety of different vents to destroy all of your plants, and they typically will do so if you especially have a corporation like this. So getting things that protect your plants is obviously a number 1 priority for this corporation. The main strategy I find for this corporation is to fill the board, making sure that you fill it not only with forests, but also with cities, and trying to combo that off of one another. What some fun combos are, again, are using those steel cities, so like the capital, Noctis City, etc., etc. There's a whole bunch of different cards that fit into that same vein, but they all work pretty well with this corporation. And the player count, less is more. So you don't want people to be taking your oxygen, the terraform rating you get for upping the oxygen. You don't want people to be playing cities on your, basically all of your forests. There's a variety of different regions, usually why you want less players with this one. I think its overall ranking is an A. This one could be a B. I think it's strong, but I don't think it's that strong. It's fun to do, and it's a great corporation if you're starting out because it's so focused on one ability and on one part of the game, and it does a good job at that. All right, next up we have Helion. So Helion has 42 ME to start with and 3 heat production. Its effect is you may use heat as ME, but you can't do the opposite. What's helpful internally for this corporation is that it has okay starting money. 42 is okay, but what's harmful about it internally is that it's heat focused. Heat I find is the worst resource in the game by far. Energy, you can do so much more with it. Titanium and steel, obviously you can spend those to do a variety of other things. Plants, indeed, you can do other things with, obviously. Mega credits, you can have whatever you want to use with them. They're not tied to anything, which is good with the effect with this one. But the problem is that heat isn't nearly as easy, I find, to get production-wise than it is for, say, just getting straight mega credits. What's helpful externally is you can take those heat cards, though. So things like Soletta, things like cards that give you basically heat production or straight heat will also just give you money, which is an awesome ability to have. What's harmful externally, though, is that you can be hate drafted, so people can also, on the other side of the coin, just take those cards and not give them to you, and that heat is generally worse than all the other resources in the game, pretty much. The general strategy for this corporation is to try to go big on production. Obviously, that heat production works really well. Having a fun combo would be getting energy production. Remember, energy turns into heat. So if you get energy and you get a lot of it, which a lot of cards can do, such as energy savings, I've seen energy savings give 10 plus energy production just by playing it. And again, it depends on which part of the game you're in. But cards like that can definitely give you a lot of energy. which again turns into heat, which turns into money. The player count, this one's kind of neutral. It depends on, again, if people are upping the temperature, and if they're doing that steadily, then I don't know. It's a tricky one with this one. That's why I put it as neutral. I don't think there's really a plus or minus. And the overall ranking I find for this one is a D. Just the heat is just not a good place to be. Even though you're not using it for the heat for the most part, you're using it mainly for the money production, I found. Okay, the Mining Guild. You start with 30 ME, 5 steel and 1 steel production. Its effect is that each time you get any steel or titanium as a placement bonus on the map, increase your steel production 1 step. So an interesting ability that you can use quite effectively. You also get 2 building tags. What's helpful internally for this corporation, it has okay starting money, the 5 steel with the production and the $30. That turns out to be okay. Not great. What's harmful internally, though, is that steel in itself isn't that amazing. Having titanium is better. Not in terms of just money, but in terms of the cards that you can play with those. What's helpful externally is that you can be open to a bunch of different things with this, and you can have some weird pathways that you can explore. You're not really super stuck with just building tags. You can do a bunch of different things with this. And what's harmful externally is that if you don't get those building cards and those building tags that you can use your steel on, you might be in a really rough spot. And especially if you don't get any placement cards. So the strategy is to find cards that can be put on the board. So a lot of special tiles, a lot of cities, clog up the board, steal forests from others, meaning playing cities next to other people's greeneries, obviously, using your steel. What's fun is you can use some combos to up your energy production. You can use it to up your plant production. Kelp farming is a great one. Kelp farming is it's extremely good card if you can get it out early. So again, it depends on maybe the preludes that people have at the beginning to get those 6 oceans out. But I've seen this out very early and be very effective. Player count, less is better, I find. It's not super important to have neutral or more in this case, but less I find to be the best for this one. Its overall ranking, I would give it is a C. It depends really on this one for a lot of the cards that you draw. If you get a lot of those special tiles and a lot of those buildings that you can use using your steel, I find that this one can be good. But if you don't get those ones and other people clog the board and take all the board resources and you don't get that placement bonus, this one can be very bad. Alright, Interplanetary Cinematics. This is an interesting one. You start with 20 steel and 30 ME. Its effect is that each time you play an event, you gain 2 ME, and you also get a building tag. What's helpful internally for this is that it has a great start. That 20 steel and 30 mega credits is a healthy, very good starting amount to have. What's harmful internally, though, is that the effect is pretty weak. You don't get to use it a whole lot, I found, especially since some of the weaker events typically tend to be bad to begin with. What's helpful externally, though, is that you're open to many strategies. You can basically branch out to do a whole lot. If you have some good building cards to start with, you can use those to kind of springboard off into other things. What's harmful externally is, again, not getting building tags to start. You need to have something to spend that 20 steel on. You can't just sit on it, I've found with this corporation. But if you do have that, it can be a huge bonus. The main strategy for this corporation I found is to be open. Your events should be nice, but they shouldn't really be your focus. Again, that $2 afterwards is not a amazing ability. If you can use it, great. If not, then so be it. What's fun is basically doing some crazy events, such as Giant Ice Asteroid, so really wrecking up the board and maybe ending the game earlier on other people. I like Giant Ice Asteroid. That's a fun one to have. Player count, I think it's kind of neutral. Overall ranking, I give this one as a B. This one is very dependent on the initial cards that you get so that you can use the steel along with the mega credits that you have. If you can do that, I think this one can be very strong and can do very well at the beginning. But if you don't do that, then I don't think that this one would be very good at all. Okay, next we have Inventrix. So you start the game as your first action, drawing 3 cards, and you have 45 ME. Your effect is that all the global requirements, you can play at +2 or -2, and you have a science tag. So what's interesting about this corporation is that you get those 3 cards to start. Having 3 cards is always a good thing to have. What's harmful, though, is that its ability is not so great. Having the +2, -2 is nice, but the problem is that the vast majority of the time, things are obviously far gone by the time you get the cards that this will be useful for, or you can use them sparingly. It doesn't show up as much as you think it would. What's helpful, though, is you could get past those cards if indeed somebody takes a different card and would obviously take a card that they could play versus one they couldn't in a draft situation. What's harmful externally is that you don't really have an engine. You don't really have anything to do necessarily. And that can be very difficult. The main strategy for the corporation, I find, is be open to anything. Use your ability, again, to the best of your ability. But there's not really a main focus. So you can kind of get lost in the shuffle with this one. Some fun combos using the other +2/-2s. And if I'm not mistaken, this one is eroded to work with other global requirements such as Venus. So having the +2/-2 with Venus, I find, can be very good. If you get the, one animal per victory point Venus card, the 2 microbes, 2 floaters, those sorts of things. I guess the 2 floater one wouldn't work because that one uses science tags. Anyways, the player count I find for this one is more is better. You typically want more people so you get more cards and see more cards in a draft sort of environment. The overall ranking I find for this one is a D. It could be even worse than that. This one really, I don't find this one great at all. Its ability is just weak. It doesn't have a great start. And I think you'll be in a tough spot most of the game if you choose this corporation. All right, next up we have, is it Phobolog or Phobolog? I think it's Phobolog. Anyways, it starts with 10 titanium and 23 ME. 10 titanium is great. Your effect is that your titanium resources are also worth 1 more ME extra. So that's an awesome ability to have, especially if you can find cards to use that with in your opening hand. What's helpful internally is, again, that you do have that amazing resource base to start with. What's harmful internally, though, is that you have the potentiality of getting bad starting cards that don't go with this corporation. You really need to use that 10 titanium and then find some way of getting some more production to use that +1 ability for the rest of the game. What's helpful externally, though, is that space cards tend to be good. I find them better to be used with, obviously, corporations that are kind of focusing on space, and this one obviously does, but it's also better than, say, steel. It's also better than, say, I find it actually better to be than plants, but again, that's a personal preference on that one. What's harmful externally, though, is that it's hate draftable. So if people don't pass you those good space tags or the tags that are expensive that also have space in them, then maybe you can kind of be lost in the shuffle with this one and be sitting on a lot of titanium. That's what you don't want to do with this corporation. The strategy for this one is go big space, not focusing on the board. So making all of your abilities, space focused, trying to figure out how you can use events, how you can use different space cards, maybe go for Jovian, etc., etc. A good card to kind of go with this one is Asteroid Mining Consortium. I understand you obviously need a titanium production to start, but this one can be just devastating if you use it, especially earlier in the game. Player count, more is better. I find that you can see more cards. Maybe you can get a better kind of sense of where the board's at. Maybe you can have more colonies where you can get titanium as well. It could be less as well. Maybe this one's more of a neutral, because with less you also have a bit of a longer game. I find people aren't terraforming to the same level. It just depends, I guess, on your play group and other people's corporations, obviously. The overall ranking I find for this one is an A. It's pretty hard to do wrong with this corporation. I find that it's very good. All right, Tharsis Republic. So you start with 40 ME, and your first action of the game, you place a city tile on the board. Its effect is that whenever a city tile is placed on Mars, increase your ME production 1 step. And then when you place a city tile, gain 3 ME. And you also have a building tag. This is, I think, is a great ability and great corporation. What's helpful internally is that ability is so good, and that other people, when they play on Mars with their cities as well, help you, which I find happens often and is very beneficial. What's harmful internally, though, is it's not initially set up for forests. So maybe if you have somebody with Ecoline, you can play next to all their forests, or you can sort of get those forest making abilities or cards. There's not a lot of cards that do that, but trying to get as many forests as you can of your own, or you can even just do the standard project, which I don't advise, but it's still an option. What's helpful externally, though, is that you can get those building cards that kind of go with this one. There's lots of building cities that would work well with this corporation. Again, there's a couple greenery cards that work, but focusing on greenery as well can be a good thing. What's harmful externally, though, is that you can get hate drafted, so people might pick up those buildings and then just discard them, the ones that provide cities. No one could be building on the board. I've had some games where, you have 4 or 5 people and everybody's doing everything on cars. The whole board is basically blank, not the whole board, but a good chunk of it, and that can be really harmful for your corporation. And having a slow start, so playing that city tile at the beginning can be good. Maybe you'll get a milestone out of it if that one's up on there, but it's not an amazing start to have, but it can be very good kind of going into the middle part of the game. Strategy is to fill the board, take other people's forests, basically just build as many cities as you can. It's a pretty good strategy to do with this one, and even when other people play cities, that's good for you too. Fun combos is getting that energy production. There's a bunch of cards that look at how many cities there are on the board. The energy savings one is an example of one that gives you energy production, but there's a few others. Again, focusing on those and keeping those in hand can be an awesome kind of engine building tool. Player count more is better, so you can have more forests on the board so you can build off of them. Again, you aren't really doing a whole lot of terraforming when you're building all of those cities, so having other people do that and then getting the fruits of their labor, I find, can be very strong. My overall ranking for this one's an A. It's not quite an S, I find, because I've seen this one flounder a little bit, but I still think it's extremely good. It might actually be an S, but right now I'm giving it an A. Okay, now we're looking at Thorgate. With Thorgate, you start with 1 energy production and 48 ME, and its effect is when you playing a power card or the standard project power plant, you pay 3 ME less for it. That's a lot of P's in there. It's difficult to say. Having a energy tag also as well is also a good thing. There's a couple cards that kind of combo with that. What's helpful internally is that you have okay starting money and it's an okay ability. And I don't find that there's a lot of energy cards that are particularly great. A lot of them give energy, which is good if you have an outlet for it, but sometimes it can be just a difficult spot to be in. I understand it also turns to heat eventually, but that's a different kind of strategy. What's harmful internally is that it can durdle. There's not a whole lot it typically focuses on, especially if you don't have those outlets for that energy. Having colonies is a great spot to be in. What's helpful externally is that you can diversify a bit, do a bunch of different things that kind of go with your energy if indeed you focus on that, which you probably should with this corporation. And what's also harmful externally is that people can hate draft those tags on you, and that can put you in a difficult spot. So having a lot of those in your opening hand can be very beneficial as well. A good strategy for this one is building buildings, getting colonies, getting a bunch of blue cards that you can use throughout the game. Those are the best avenues for victory for this one, and playing a bunch of different victory point or production base energy resources or energy tags, etc., etc. Fun combos for this one are doing different buildings, so using your ability to play cards that subtract energy production. There's a whole bunch of different cards actually that do that, and some of them are very good, but having that energy production available to be subtracted from is a great spot to be in. Player count, I find this one's neutral. Again, you can use the energy to fly. Having colonies or having multiple trade fleets is an awesome ability for this one as well. Overall ranking, I give this one a C. I think you could play this one up to a B, especially if you have some good starting cards and some good colonies that you can use with this one. But I find if you don't get those, this one can be very bad. It doesn't have a super strong engine if you can't do anything with it, and that's difficult when it's card-based. All right, UNMI, United Nations Mars Initiative. So you start with 40 ME and an Earth tag. Your action is that if your terraform rating was raised this generation, you may pay 3 ME to raise it 1 step more. Now this one I think gets misread quite often. You don't just get to do the action of pay 3 to increase your terraform rating. You need to have already done that this turn. So what's helpful is that it's an internal engine. If you can get that going, that's very good and can get a good return on victory points. Having $3 for 1 terraform rating is an awesome turnaround. Again, what's harmful about it is it can be slow. That's not going to go as fast, I think, as you think it will, especially when you can only do that once a generation. and it can be misread. I find that this one gets misread quite a bit. What's helpful externally is that the card diversity can help you with this. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can do to get that terraform rating every time. It could be microbes, it could be Venus, it could be floaters, it could be a bunch of different things, different engines that you could employ to get it so that you're hitting that terraform rating every turn. And for this corporation, you really need to do that every single time. What's harmful externally is that it's slow, and you have to get that terraform rating in order for this to be super functional. So the strategy again for this corporation is finding that terraform rating engine, maybe having 2 or 3 different ones. Some fun cards that would go with that are asteroid cards. Those ones, I think, especially some of the cool promo ones with the big blocks, those would be cool to kind of use with this one. For the player count, I find that this one is typically neutral. Maybe it's not really set for the end game, so it's not amazing in that capacity. With less or more, it doesn't. I think it's just neutral. And the overall ranking for this one, I find, is a C. It could be actually worse than that, depending on if you don't get that engine going. Okay, and now we got Teractor. We have 60 ME to start with and an Earth tag. And then its effect is whenever you're playing an Earth card, you may pay 3 ME less for it. So a decent ability. What's also great about this one is that it has a great start. 60 ME is a great place to be in. What's harmful, though, is that it can dirtle again. That doesn't really have a focus. I mean, Earth cards are a focus, and you can do that. But the problem is if you don't get those, and a lot of times you don't, that this one can be in a tricky spot. What's helpful externally is that it's open to many different things. So having, again, ME is always going to be more open than having steel or titanium or any other resource, really. And what's harmful externally is that it's hate draftable. I find people, when you play this corporation, tend to take a lot of Earth tags. Because Earth tags tend to be pretty good in terms of giving you ME production, and most people want ME production in this game. It's a good spot to be in. Strategy, I think, for this one is Earth it up. So if you have a lot of good Earth cards to start with, definitely sticking with those. Maybe getting some wild tags to help you with that along the way. Money production also helps you. And you get that innately, I think, with playing those Earth cards. What's fun is that you're open, again, very much with this one. Things like pets or any variety of other, good Earth cards can really help you with this corporation. The player count more is typically better, so you can see more cards. You can also, leverage your dollar amount at the beginning to kind of go long and try some cool strategies. It's really open. I give this one an A. Okay, now we have Saturn Systems. So you start with the 1 titanium production and 42 ME. And then its effect is that each time a Jovian tag is put into play, including this, increase your ME production 1 step. So that's a good start. You're having a great dollar amount in 42, and then also having the titanium production. I guess it's not a great dollar amount. It's good. But what's harmful for this one is that you don't have the luxury of having bad starting cards. I think you really need to have cards that kind of go with this and then focus on those. Again, having some space cards that go with this, or having some Jovian tags, or putting those Jovian tags out there when you're drafting can be a good strategy to have. And the space cards are typically pretty good. What's harmful externally, though, is that you can be hate drafted. So if people are taking Jovian tags and then just dumping them, they're not actually playing them, and that can put you in a really bad spot. I found that most people actually do play those Jovian ones, especially some of the expansion Jovian cards that are very good and do a lot of really good things. So making sure that titanium production is up can be a great strategy. Playing a bunch of different cool space cards or colony cards, or cool Jovian cards like Beam from a Thorium asteroid or asteroid mining, etc., etc. There's a bunch of different ones that you can play. And then the player kind of I find for this one is more is better. You want to go through the deck more. You want to have more Jovian cards played. You don't even necessarily have to focus on Jovian for this one. As long as someone else is, and there's other people kind of competing with those, instead of just hate drafting them and dumping them, you can be in a good spot. Overall ranking, I give it this one as a B. But I think this one could be an A based on the expansions you're playing with and making sure that other people aren't just dumping these cards everywhere. All right, last but not least, we have the Beginner Corporation. So you start with 42 ME, and instead of participating in the research phase, the first one there, you draw 10 cards for free. Having 10 cards and lots of cards at the beginning can definitely be helpful. Having lots of good cards can be definitely an awesome spot to be in. $42 isn't an amazing spot to be in by any stretch. But again, having lots of cards, you can also sell them for $1 each if you had to. What's harmful internally is though if you get bad starting cards, you are in a very difficult spot. Again, it's very luck-based for this one. What's helpful externally, though, is that you can be a wild card. You can be unpredictable. People don't know what you're going to do, what you're going to go into. You can take a bunch of different cards or hang on to a bunch of different cards, and then people will pass you other things to go with those, and then you just purposefully kind of hold those until later in the game, where you can spring them all out, and you can't be hate drafted, basically, anymore, because you have them all in your hand. What's harmful externally, though, is that you have no engine, and there's not really an engine to kind of go into. It's hard to basically be this corporation. I find it's very much based on the luck of the 10 cards that you get. So the strategy is just stay open and play what works best. There's lots of fun combos that you can go through. Topsoil Contract is a very cool promo card that you could take advantage of with this corporation. The player count for this one I find to be neutral. It doesn't really matter either way. And the overall ranking I find for this one is D. This one can fluctuate a little bit based on how good the starting cards are. Thank you for watching my video on the base corporations and their strategy for Terraforming Mars. I've taken a look through all the base corporations. Now my goal is to go through all of the ones for Venus, for Turmoil, for Colonies, for Prelude, for the promo cards. It'd be a great project to do. I have some ideas, and I have basically the same sort of format for each of the different colony lists. If you have any comments about any of the different corporations, if you have any comments about any of the cards or strategies, or maybe you think something different, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your opinion. My hope is to one day do a March Madness kind of bracket for all the different corporations to see who's the overall victor for who can terraform Mars the best. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.